Hello, Keller Williams. Welcome to another edition of How I Built It, the Wealth Building Series. Today, we've got a great longtime investor, Rob Chevez, with us. Rob, welcome to the show.
Jay, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
I know you love talking about investing. Tell us a little bit about your real estate business, and then we'll dive into investing.
Sure. I run a real estate team in the DC metro area, specifically in Reston, Virginia. But we did about 110 million in volume last year. I think 97th in the company, but nobody's keeping track, right? And I have the pleasure of just leading an awesome group of people in this area. And we work with a lot of investors, but we also focus on going after hyper-local geographic markets because we believe in zoning both geographic markets and psychographic markets. And that's how we're really building our business.
Congrats on a great year. That's an amazing year. None of us expected to finish the year quite like we did, but you certainly pivoted and did amazing production last year. So congrats so much on that. Thanks,
Jay. Appreciate it.
So as a real estate investor, you shared with me in our pre-interview, you kind of got started in the 90s. I think it was around 97 or so. You read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like right out of college. It's so funny how many people that book is their gateway drug.
It is. I read the book and I was like, oh man, like what am I doing? Like this makes so much sense to me. And I house hacked my first house. I think it was 98 or 99.
Tell us what that means, because there might be people watching that don't know what house hacking is. What does that mean?
So what happened was I read the book and then said, well, I should consider buying a property and then putting my tenants into that or friends into that property. I had done this, by the way, in college a little bit. I wrestled Division I in college. And I don't know if I shared that with you.
Remind me not to pick a fight with you.
Hey, I was the little guy. In college. I wrestled D1 in college, and I was the one that organized and got the house for all the wrestlers. Right.
Okay.
And I met the landlord at the time. I still remember her name. Her name was Mrs. Chu. And I had to present to her and tell her that, we were going to be responsible. This is the wrestling team, right? We're going to be a responsible team. And so anyhow, that was my first introduction into understanding, like, here we are paying rent to this landlord while I was in college. And I was really kind of the head of the household. So when I graduated from college and I read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I was like, well, I would love to own that asset. And I already know what it's like to find people to put them into a house and get everybody to play nice and set up individual leases with them and making sure that like this is run like a business. That's what I did. And I still remember, that first month when I think my mortgage payment was like $1,100, right? And my portion was only $200 and the rest was getting covered by my friends. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do more of this in my life. I'm not sure how, but I want to do more of this. And that took me down the journey of reading more books, Cash Flow Quadrant, attending real estate investment meetings to just try to learn as much as I possibly could. There was this whole other language out there that investors had. And when I went to these real estate investment associations, I realized this is a really big world and I want to be part of this world.
And you, as a profession out of college, you and a friend started like a recruiting firm, right? You were recruiting executives and tech people?
Yeah, we were recruiting. It started with entry-level salespeople.
Okay,
so
there we go.
I had a good friend of mine. So I actually had the privilege, I'll back up a little bit. I had the privilege of, when I was in college, there was a gentleman that was a very wealthy business owner. He would essentially kind of help fund the program. And I got exposed to this wealthy individual who was an entrepreneur, right? He owned restaurants and then he got into the insurance business. When I was in college, he asked me this simple question. He said, what do you want to do once you graduate from college? And I just said, well, I want to own my own business. And he said, well, what do you want to do now, right now? And I was like, I really don't know. And he said, why don't you come work for me? And I started working for him when I was in college in the accounting department, right? Which is crazy because I was literally not an accountant, right? But he wanted me to understand kind of like that side of the business. And then he wanted me to understand the sales side of the business. So I went to go work for him. And that's what opened up my eyes to being a business owner. I worked for him for about a year right out of college. And then my best friend approached me and said, hey, I'm thinking about starting this recruiting business. I got approached by somebody who said they'll pay me $5,000 if I place an entry-level salesperson with them in their company. And $5,000 was like all the money in the world, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, but they'll pay you.
Well, you're only netting $100 or $200 a month in rent. That would have taken care of your rent for a long time.
For a long time, right? For a long time. So I love my mentor, but this was the opportunity for me to be able to start a business with my best friend. And we did. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing. We worked out of his bedroom essentially. And we built that into, a pretty sizable little business, which still exists today, by the way.
Wow. Are you still a partner in it, or did he buy you out at some point?
He bought me out in 2005 so that I could pursue real estate full time.
Nice.
So that journey,
what a natural segue back into the real estate conversation.
That's right. So that's what happened. I just, from 99 to 2005, my wife and I were on this journey of buying assets, real estate assets. And we were really more buy and hold people. And by 2005, I realized that it felt very frothy, very similar to what the tech bust felt like in the year 2002. And I just happened to mention to my wife, I said, we own about six or seven properties at the time. And I said, I think we should sell these assets, which I regret now. But at the time, it seemed like a smart thing.
Yeah.
I think we should sell these assets because I think that we're at a market high. And I believe we should go into real estate full time because I think we're going to go through some kind of dip. If we immerse ourselves in this business, we might find opportunity as it starts coming out of the dip. I mean, that was kind of the overall thinking.
Right. I mean, you're actually really accurate. Now, I've been taught not to try to time the market, but you actually were doing it and you were kind of eerily correct about the timing.
I was eerily, but it was only because I'd gotten my butt kicked in the dot-com bust. And
right.
I saw what that felt like. I knew what that felt like. I mean, Jay, it felt like one day you're making a lot of money, then all of a sudden somebody just turned off the spigot and nobody can get jobs, right? And you've got people that are making $300,000 or $400,000 a year as VPs of sales at companies, and they're coming to you and you're like, maybe 80, maybe I can get you something where you're making, I mean, it was crazy. And we were a firm of 13 recruiters and we whittled down to 3 partners. And then we had, and then by 2005, we built that business back up. But my heart was in real estate. Mm-hmm. And so my wife and I went down this journey of wanting to build a real estate investment business. Didn't really know what that meant, to be honest with you. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a system. I didn't have a mentor. I just had a feeling that this was the direction that I wanted to go in. Looking back, it's just really foolish, right? Really foolish. But at the same time, intuition has served me well along the way. And I knew that I would be able to figure out a way to make it happen.
Is this when you first got into real estate sales? Did you start at Keller Williams or did you start at an Indy or some other company?
No, when I got into the sales side, it was KW was the first place. And in fact, what happened was as I was venturing down this path of a full-time real estate investor from 2005 till about 2007, I picked up the book at a Barnes & Noble, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent's book. And when I picked up the book, it literally spoke to me because I was like, this isn't a book about real estate. This is a business book. I don't know who this Gary Keller, Jay Papasan people are, right? But this is a book about business. And you could take the word real estate agent out and put in recruiter, and it was the same business.
Any service business it works for. It doesn't quite work that way in a product sales business, but for a service business, it's just a blueprint, how to run a great one.
Amazing one. I found the nearest KW right next to where I lived. I hung up my license there. I mean, I decided to get my license purely as a way to get referral fees for my investment business. And then I still remember my first family reunion, which I believe was in Las Vegas in like 2007. I think that was in Las Vegas. That's where I heard Gary say, you need to build a database. And I remember thinking, okay, I need to build a database. How do I do that? Right. And that's where we started shifting our mindset a little bit. Instead of buying and fixing and flipping 20 homes a year, which by the way, I learned that there's certain personalities that are developer kind of personalities that like taking on that risk. And I wasn't one of them. I'm more of a buy and hold person. Right. And that business was 2 hours away from where we lived. Let me go back a little bit. We were managing from 2005 to 2007. we were now managing around 300 doors for other investors, because what the model that
right? Mostly multifamily.
Yeah. Because what we found was that we were selling these investment deals turnkey to investors, because I needed to make 30, 60, 90-day cash flow as I was building my portfolio. But it was 2 hours away from where I lived. It was a lot of work, and I was carrying a lot of debt, and I didn't like that. And when I read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, I realized that there was a better way to do this. Why don't I sell 20 homes or 30 homes a year and then take that cash and then buy real estate assets the whole long term? So that became the model for me. And I had that discussion with my wife. Like, I think we should shift and kind of go in this direction. And that led me down the path of wanting to start building a team, but purely always knowing that I'm buying real estate assets along the way, right? And paying those assets off over time.
And remind us what your production was last year, and 12 years or so, you've built a pretty remarkable team. What did y'all sell last year?
Yeah, it was the volume was 110 million.
It's pretty good. It's a little bit more than a decade of work. Didn't happen overnight, but that's amazing.
Thank you. And we've done a little bit better in years past. We've done just constantly like this growing up and down, right? And but we had a good year last year.
What does your investment portfolio look like today? Like, you had 300 doors. It sounds like you were going to transition to this more of a buy and hold. What does that look like today?
We used to own more assets. I found that owning more didn't necessarily mean better. Right? Okay. So we have 17 properties today. 8 of those are owned in partnership with somebody. And I've got a blueprint actually for an agent I could share with you real fast, but 8 of them are in partnership. So if you think about it, 4 of them, so I own 13 with my wife, 13 ourselves, right, that we control 100% of, right? Those properties net us about $4,500 in positive cash flow, of which we just put a month.
Right.
That we just put right back in to pay down the debt. Because the goal for me, Jay, was to always build this really strong base, right?
Right. If you have those houses free and clear, you get 100% of the cash flow after just maintenance and taxes and things like that. It really jumps, your cash flow jumps considerably. We'll have those paid off in the next 3 to 4 years. And the cash flow at that point, after everything, after taxes, insurance, property management, will be around $13,000. That's just completely free and clear of cash flow. It's about $24,000, right, in total rents collected. But then you start factoring in, okay, well, we've got taxes, we've got maintenance, we have property management. So the net's around $13,000 a month just from those assets. Right. It's still about $150,000 a year in income when you get there. That's not too shabby.
Yeah. And that was the plan, right? The plan was to be able to do that. And then we also realized that along this journey was that we were going to build other businesses that would also provide positive.
Before you move on, can I hit pause? And I'll bring you back there. Before, other businesses, that'll be my little placeholder. So you own a certain percentage with partners. Did that happen because you ran out of conventional financing, or just because the opportunity to invest with partners showed up? I know with that many properties, you run out of conventional financing at some point, and you'll have to raise capital another way. Was that the driving factor, or was it something else?
So it was during the financial crisis, right? Okay. In 2008, I looked up and I said, everything is on sale, right? And I was a recently self-employed real estate guy during the worst, real estate financial crisis since the Great Depression. Lehman Brothers was just filing for bankruptcy. Nobody was going to give me a loan, right, to buy it. And we, by the way, my wife and I already owned, I think, our maximum somewhere around, at the time, around 10 assets, right? Right. So I just happened to mention to this gentleman that had a lot of money, hey, this is interesting. These assets peaked at around $350. They are now approaching about $150. Rents are $1,500 a month. This is the 1% rule. I haven't seen this happen in our market ever. I went back in the MLS and I'm like, I haven't seen this happen.
Right.
We should consider buying one. And then he said, well, if you find that, we call it like the buy box. If you find that, I'll fund it. You then manage the crews to fix it up, right? Put the tenant in, and then we'll refinance the cash back out, which, now everybody calls the Burr method. But at the time,
at the end of that process, are y'all 50-50 or is there a different split?
50-50 at the end of that process. So literally, Jay, I got into these assets with no money out of my own pocket.
Sweat equity only.
Sweat equity only. And which is a great blueprint for agents, because agents are always waiting till they feel like they have enough money to do it. And it's not that they need the money, they need the knowledge. That's what I discovered.
They need the deal. I'm going to just correct that. If you find a deal, the money will follow. And you identified a deal, and a savvy investor, a guy who had a lot of money, or a gal had a lot of money, he or she is like, I recognize a good deal, right? That's how it works. Actually, my wife and I did a similar deal with Dave Jinks. He had some cash. He did not want any part of having to hunt for investments or deal with it. In exchange for his down payment, and we did all the work, we were 50-50 partners. So that formula works.
It works. And personally, I like partners. I've met a lot of people along the way that don't like partners. I like partners. I seem to play well with partners. I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind partners. I guess along the way, I've chosen good partners, right? And so it's like a good relation, a good marriage, right? That's just you figure it out. And we've had ups and downs. Like this partner and I have had ups and downs, but ultimately, we've always been better together than separate. And so that became a model for us. And then the goal became to really start paying down a lot of these assets that we had accumulated over time. I'd seen a lot of people over leverage during that time, and I saw go through a tech recession, and I saw then what it looked like to go through a real estate recession. I was like, I want to build such a strong foundation that nobody could ever take anything away from us as a family.
Because you've been through two significant recessions in your professional career: the dot-com bust in your recruiting firm, and then the Great Recession in your real estate and investing business.
Yep. And we've always been able to figure out a way to navigate it, do well, thrive during that time. There's always opportunity there. And a lot of it is just hard work, right? And keeping your eyes open and shifting. And I remember when I first went to KW, Gary literally, he put that graph on the big wall, right? And the Jumbotron or whatever you call it. And he essentially said, listen, this is where we were.
Oh, yeah. The shifting markets graph. A wave. You can see the top
right, the wave.
Bottom. Yeah.
And literally I was like, we are this looks like the bottom to me. Like if I'm going to buy, I should buy now. And I remember Warren Buffett came out on CNBC and he said, when everybody's greedy, be fearful. When everybody's fearful, be greedy. And literally, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to listen to these really smart guys and just go all in. And actually, I didn't go all in. I dipped my toe in. We did about one a month, right? For just under 12 months.
And then, one a month for most people is all in. That may not be for you, but for most people, that's all in. That's a very relative statement.
Yeah. Well, you start saying, wow, we could have bought so much more. But it was scary. It was a scary time. We weren't sure like how it was all going to pan out. And, cautionary tale, I'll make a little cautionary tale on this. Like one mistake that I made was that by 2011, as the market started coming back, I felt like everything was overpriced. In 2011, that I was like, why would I buy that asset for 180 when I picked it up for 110 just a few years ago, right? But yet the numbers worked from my financials, from the interest rate standpoint, like it totally worked, right? So we could have kept buying more, and we didn't, right? We went through a fix and flip phase because 2011, 2012 was a good phase for that. But we continue to buy today. In fact, I'm in St. Pete, Florida today. I'm going to check on a rental property that my wife and I bought down here a couple of years ago, and right off the trip, and maybe even think about buying another one. Like I'll be down here on vacation looking for real estate.
What does the finish line look like for you when you look up and say, our goal, when we think about like a passive income goal, what does that look like for you and your wife?
At this point, Jay, there is no finish line. It's an infinite game. I enjoy what I've learned is that I enjoy the game. I would say level one was first, let's get the $10,000 in passive income, right? That we already know we're there, right? Level two was now get to 20,000. And when these assets get paid off, we'll be at 20,000, right? Okay.
So in some ways your work could be considered done, but you're not done.
No, because this is fun, right? Like this is fun. And I enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. It's not work to me, right?
How do you and your wife divide labor in their investment in real estate businesses? What's your role and what's her role? Because we have a lot of husband and wife teams out there, and you guys obviously have a long partnership, so y'all are doing some things right. What are y'all's roles and responsibilities?
So I've been the BD guy, and she's been the ops person.
So right? Business development for you, sales. She's
sales,
ops.
And she's ops, right? And she's helped with systems and processes and helps me think through how to build a bigger business like that. And she's more of an introvert, so she likes being behind the scenes. And, I guess I'm more of an extrovert. I like being out there and talking to people and negotiating deals and creating partnerships and finding opportunity. And I enjoy that.
What is your ultimate criteria? Do you still look for the 1% rule? Is that possible? Or is it like a minimum cash flow? When you're looking for investments, whether that be in St. Pete or in Virginia, what are you looking for?
So now no, I'm not looking for the 1% rule anymore. I'm looking for a couple $100 in positive cash flow, right? I know if I can cash flow factoring in expenses, couple $100 a month, I should do that. And I should do it all day long. And I should just continue buying like that. I'm also looking for areas of growth, right? So wherever I see growth occurring, because by default, what will happen is time is going to take care of equity, right? When you're actually in the line of growth. So I'll look at people migrating to certain areas. I'll look at the number of permits that are being pulled in areas. And I want to be in the path of growth.
What are the signs? I mean, like I'm sure some people are going to take that and they're going to go, well, I'm going to look around my MLS in the greater metro area and look for, like, in my own limited understanding, where do people appear to be migrating? Where are the permits being pulled? Are there any other signs that they should be looking for that maybe this is got more upside than your average area? And I'm also going to caveat it. Nobody has a crystal ball. And then there is, you have to buy cash flow, which you establish first. So worst case scenario, your renters are going to pay off your debt and you'll have some margin on top of it. But we also love to participate when possible in some appreciation, which is never guaranteed. So I'm going to take you off the hook, right? Because nobody's got a crystal ball. There is no science that tells you exactly what's going to happen. But based on your experience, what are you looking for? I'm
looking for a vibrant, growing area, and typically where the demographic's a little bit younger.
Okay.
Right. And you're starting to see, I'll give you an example. I 3 or 4 years ago, I came to St. Pete, right? St. Pete, Florida. And I noticed that in the downtown St. Pete area, somebody had told me, before, St. Pete was the area where people would come to die, right? Essentially, it was like
retirement,
end of retirement, right? Exactly. But when I looked around, all I saw were really young, hip, fun people doing things and starting to change the landscape of what the area looked like, right? I saw breweries being opened up. I saw a lot of energy. And so I then said, okay, how many people are coming into this area? And I saw that there was a little bit of a spike in growth. And I'm like, I feel like there's momentum here and I'm going to start buying in this area, right? So I wanted to start seeing development. I wanted to start seeing art, right? And you start going into certain areas that, my mom's an artist, so you start seeing warehouses being converted over, and there's a lot of art spaces, and there's a lot of trendiness. I'm like following that, right? So that served me well over the last decade, just paying attention to that, right? You can feel it, you could see it, you can see the construction going on.
I can only see this in retrospect, but I'll do a little confirmation bias here, because I believe what you're saying, so I'm finding evidence that supports it. But when my wife and I bought our first home in Barton Hills in Austin, it was a neighborhood that had been built out in the 70s. And, we had just had our first son, and we'd be walking around with the stroller and we weren't seeing any other young people because so many of the homes were actually by original owners. And I'll still remember we were on the green belt. It was like very desirable near downtown, but an old neighborhood. There was one other couple with a kid, and it was I remember it was TLC because it was Tim, Laura, and Caleb. Caleb was the son. But TLC is how I remember their names because I'm an introvert. But I was like, oh, great, there's another couple here. And then we started noticing that this neighborhood was actually starting to turn over. And that going from the retirement community to being an attractive place for young people, we've seen disproportionate, right, appreciation because people are renovating the homes. You're getting a younger, higher energy. And that brings I remember the first neighborhood bar that you could walk to. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a bar in the neighborhood now and a pizzeria. And all of these things started to happen as it became, essentially, it became young professionals starting families that started moving into this, and it really changed the dynamics.
That's right. And the first glimpse I had at this, Jay, was, and I didn't quite benefit as much as we could have, but same thing with my wife and I, we bought in this affluent area during the dot-com boom when I was making a lot of money as a recruiter. I made a move. I bought into this neighborhood that was in an affluent area in the Northern Virginia area, McLean, right?
Right.
And we were by
where AOL was? Was it McLean, Virginia? No, it's nearby.
Yeah, it's
where
nearby.
AOL?
AOL's in the Ashburn area.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, it's not too far away. At the time, it seemed like all the money in the world, Jay. It was, I think we bought it for $320,000, right? It was
right.
2002, and I was recently married, and my little girl was just born. And we were by far the youngest. There was nobody else in the neighborhood. Fast forward a couple years, we sold that property. We made a couple $100,000 on the sale of that property, which, we were like, oh, we did really, really well. A couple years later, you started really seeing all of those houses get scraped, torn down, and new homes built on there. Today, you can't touch anything for under $2 million, right?
Yeah.
You just can't. And I'm like, oh, my wife's always like, we should have kept that house. We should have kept that house. Right.
Yeah.
And so the good news is that this is happening in other markets at other times. You can almost go back in time when you look at other markets, right? Because markets are different cycles, right? So when I came to St. Pete, I was like, oh, this feels like our area 10 years ago.
Right.
That was my initial feeling. And now I'm just seeing more and more growth in this area. But there's places like that all over the United States.
Well, if you're a realtor in your market and you kind of have a sense of where the young professionals are naturally migrating to, right? They haven't gotten to their peak earning years. So they're getting in good bones neighborhoods. And then as they earn more money, they start to improve them. That's naturally, or they move on. So I love that. We're going to run out of time. So thank you. And I'm going to caveat that conversation again, folks. You buy cash flow. You buy cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. No one has a crystal ball, but everything that Rob just said is super smart. There are some areas that have a higher opportunity for appreciation. If there's a good job growth, right? In the general area, you've got a foundation of job growth, then you can go into those opportunity neighborhoods and maybe have an upside, but you just can't count on it. I've said that now, I think 7 times. I think I've let myself off the hook because we preach, don't speculate. But you can be smart. Just don't outsmart yourself.
Can I just throw in one thing real fast?
Yes, of course. This is your interview. I'm just being all risk averse now.
Well, I would say, one of the areas, Gary talked to us about building a database. I built our grid investor network.
That was where I was going next. So perfect. Yeah. You anticipated it. I wanted to finish on your network, your database of investor network. So fire away.
Perfect. Well, I started that primarily because Gary was like, listen, you need to build a database of people. And I remember thinking, well, I want to be able to create a one-to-many exchange, right? I could pick up the phone and call a lot of people, or I can knock on doors. But what if I could create an environment where 10 people would come to me, or 20, or 30, or 40? And so I created a group of like-minded people who wanted to share about their real estate investment experience. And that group grew. It's now 15,000 people. So it's grown by a lot. It's in 8 different states.
What's the name? Is there a significance to the name Grid Investor, or is it just a URL that you could get?
So it's plug into the grid, right? Okay. The power is in the grid. The power is in all the relationships all around you. We believe that everything that you would ever want to know in investing, any money that you would ever need, any deal that you would ever need is all around you with all the relationships that you form over time, right? And when I look back now, because I can look back and say wow, 30% of my team originated from the Grid network, and 25, 25 people in my first line are all from the Grid Network. And my investment and my wealth building has all come from the network. And, building a tribe of like-minded people who are interested in building wealth and creating legacy has been immensely good for us. And what we've noticed is that we know it's immensely good for other leaders as well. So we decided to start allowing other people in other markets to really plug into the grid, right? And start building their own local tribes, because real estate is all local, right? And what this is now becoming is, for me, giving me the ability to be able to plug into leaders in other markets, where if I want to buy in Austin, Texas, or if I want to buy in St. Pete, I have leaders running chapters that I trust, know the market, are investors themselves, and are leading by coming from contribution and helping the community build wealth and legacy. So we see a global network and a global opportunity. And it just started off as an idea of building a database, just like Gary said, right?
I love, we preached that for years. And I'm going blank on his name up in Canada, but he was doing huge business from every first Tuesday, he would do his investor seminars.
Yep.
And that just that's really a good business model. And when we wrote The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, the reason we wrote The Millionaire Real Estate Investor was Christina Martinez.
Yeah.
The most successful realtor we talked to had a very small database. I think her database was only about 500 or 600 people, but they were investors. And she was getting as many as 4 to 5 repeat deals from them annually because she was helping them build their wealth. And it was a huge aha for Gary, Dave, and I. Like, wow, what a great business model. Sounds like you grabbed that by the throat and said, I'm gonna ride this horse. And you built it locally, and now it's become a whole thing. Like my wife joined your network earlier this year because we've been doing investor seminars, and you just provided an easy framework to plug into.
And I was inspired, by the way, when I read Christina's bio in the back of the Red Book. I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, this makes a lot of sense to me. And so it's what's great about it is that I now look back and I'm like, oh, there were people that started in our chapter that had zero investment experience. And today they're teaching me, right, how to do things, because they might be in another, real estate investing is such a big word. So they're doing development projects or lease options or wholesale or subject twos. And so together we all achieve more, bottom line.
Love it. And any final advice you would give to our KW Realtor audience about starting their journey? Yes.
Don't think that you need the money, Jay, in order to start this. What you need is the deal, to go back to what you say, right? You need specialized knowledge to understand what a deal is, but just go out and take action and start building it today. You can partner with people to help you get to where you want to go. The power is in the network.
I love it. Thanks for sharing us. Thanks for giving me a glimpse of sunny Florida right now when it's winter everywhere else. Love that. And Congrats to you and your wife on building a great marriage partnership around this journey. And then you've shared it with a lot of people. So thank you for doing that. That's so uniquely KW, this idea of just building it and sharing it. And I just love that you're doing that.
Thanks, Jay. It's been my pleasure.
All right, folks. Next week, it'll be the Wealth Building Wednesdays. And the week after that, we'll be back to How I Built It, Wealth Building Edition. See you then.